All right, we are live. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the fourth and final session of our conversation around the concepts explored in the book, The Color of Law. I am at-large Councilwoman Tamika Isaac Devine, and it is my honor and privilege to be here tonight and introduce this last topic for us. The purpose of this conversation, and like I mentioned, this is the fourth and final session. If you missed one of the first three sessions, please go back to the city's website or Historic Columbia, and you can see our previous sessions. We have been, for the last 2 months, having a very rich, engaging, and educational conversation how our government has helped segregate America. I think in order for us to move forward, we have to understand where we've been. And when I was first introduced to this book about a year ago at the National League of Cities, I read it. I was very inspired by it, but I knew that just having city leaders inspired by this book wasn't enough. We needed to have a community conversation and a real honest conversation about where we are, where we've been, how we got here, and then how do we collectively move forward together. And that's what these sessions have been about. They've been about discussing honestly how the city of Columbia developed over the years and how certain parts of the city have been left out. And then how do we collectively come up with innovative solutions to move forward? And so the first two sessions were about gentrification and redlining. Our third session was with our author, Richard Rothstein. And now we have an amazing session of where do we go from here? And that's really the question. When I first came up with this concept and this idea, and I shared it with some folks and said, hey, I want to have this community discussion, the first question I got from folks is, well, Tamika, you have this conversation, but then what? What do you want to come out of it? And what we wanted to see is how we can move forward together. And so tonight's panel is called Where Do We Go From Here? Innovative Solutions from Today's Mayors. And so today we have some amazing mayors who are bold leaders in their communities, and they are not just confronting the history of their cities, but they are moving forward with real bold solutions to make sure that everybody in their cities are empowered and that they're moving forward together in a more equitable, inclusive city. And so this is going to be a great conversation. I do want to remind everybody that if you're watching, if you have any questions after the panel, our amazing moderator will put questions to our great mayors. And so if you put some questions in the chat box, or excuse me, not the chat box, the question and answer box, they will be monitored and we'll make sure that we get to as many questions as we can. So tonight we have with us our moderator, which I'd have to say, she really needs no introduction. I mean, everyone here in Columbia knows what a jewel that we have in the amazing Judy Gatson. But I have to say, every time we have something, whether it's something regarding domestic violence or women's leadership or a debate, Judy Gatson is always there. And so we can't thank her enough. Judy is an anchor at WIS News, Live at 5, WIS News at 6, and WIS News Nightcasts here in the city of Columbia. She's covered the Democratic primary of the historic presidential election of 2008. And she's been anchoring WIS primetime coverage and conducting a series of in-depth interviews with all the candidates. She's also covered presidential inauguration live from the nation's capital, and she is always there in the community in addition to what she does with WIS. She's an award-winning journalist, and she has gotten 3 Emmys. I think I'm right on that, Judy. And I know just recently they had a great big announcement at WIS. But most importantly, Judy is a servant leader. She brings the news to us every single day from her heart, and she's always setting it straight. I have to say, I tease Judy because it's hard to be a journalist, especially in this day and age. And she pulls no punches. It doesn't matter if it's somebody that she knows or someone she doesn't know. She's going to be a hard-hitting journalist. She's going to bring the right questions to make sure she's bringing the answers to you, the public. And so I couldn't think of any other person to moderate this panel with these dynamic mayors than none other than Judy Gatson. So thank you, Judy, and welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Councilwoman Tamika Isaac Devine. Thank you for your leadership in bringing this conversation to the forefront for our community and really for anyone to join around the country. I know the pandemic has been so hard for so many people, but the blessing through all of this is that we get to bring more people to the table for these conversations as we talk about what happens next. And I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation because I respect the voices of these mayors and these leaders that we're going to hear from so much this evening, and looking forward to hear what their visions are, the challenges that they have for us as we all think about how we can be a part of the solution, the call for change to move our communities forward, to create a more just, a more equitable society that gives everybody the opportunity to succeed. I'm going to do very brief introductions because I really want to reserve our time for the dialogue and for the Q&A portion. I would just invite everyone who's watching this evening, don't wait until we get to the end to start asking your questions. Jot down your questions as we're talking so that we can engage right away once we get through the panel part of this discussion, because we want you to feel empowered, we want you to feel challenged, and we want you to be fired up and ready to go when we get out of this conversation this evening so that you can be a powerful force for change in your own communities. Again, let me do brief introductions this evening. Columbia Mayor Steve Benjamin, joining us this evening, an American politician, businessman, serving as the 36th mayor of the city of Columbia since July of 2010. He announced today that he's not seeking re-election, but he's going to be serving out through the end of the year and has the distinction of being the capital city's first African-American mayor, of course, a distinguished attorney as well, and a community servant who has served the community in so many regards. So we are delighted to have him on the panel this evening. Also, another Columbia native, but she is now leading the Queen City. Lyles was sworn in as the 59th mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. She began her second term in December of 2019 after serving, or receiving, I should say, more than 77% of the vote in the general election. So an overwhelming vote of confidence there in her leadership. As a Democratic mayor, Mayor Lyles is known for her strong commitment toward creating jobs, expanding affordable housing, and safe, livable neighborhoods. So we'll be looking forward to hearing from her in the conversation tonight, and delighted as well to welcome to the conversation the Honorable Chokwe Lumumba. We've not had the opportunity to meet before, but I am delighted to meet you via Zoom this evening. He is the mayor of the city of Jackson, Mississippi, 34 years old, making him the youngest mayor in that city's history. He is an attorney, a husband, a father, and the son of two lifelong community activists. Also earned his Juris Doctorate and certificate in sports and entertainment law from Thurgood Marshall School of Law at Texas Southern University. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being a part of this important conversation tonight. Mayor Lumumba, I'm going to start with you. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. believed that a guaranteed income was really one of the most effective ways to eradicate poverty. Both you and Mayor Benjamin, in fact, are a part of the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income Initiative. And in 2018, the Magnolia's Mothers Trust was launched in your city there of Jackson, a guaranteed income pilot that focused on Black low-income mothers. So I'd like to start, if you would, by having you to tell us more about how a guaranteed income can be one of the tools used to fight poverty. And then I have a follow-up about you being the son of two community activists. But for those who are not familiar with this concept and how it works and what the success has been so far in your community, talk to a little bit about how that can really be an effective tool to fight poverty.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, let me express my gratitude for the invitation to be a part of this illustrious panel. And I want to, express, express my gratitude to my good friends, Lyles and Steve Benjamin, and the organizers of this event have really moved forward in a bold way. I don't know what a panel with a mayor who is now announced that he is not going to run for re-election, what he might say. So that is a very bold move to have him on. Thank you for this discussion, and I think it's a most important discussion. We are proud to be one of the cities that are aligned with cities across this country who are mayors for a guaranteed income, understanding that the worst form of violence is poverty. The fact that communities are going through cycles of humiliation and don't have the very basics that they need to survive. You mentioned the words of Martin Luther King, and I think King said it best when he said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism, but this country must do a better job of giving wealth to all of God's children. And that's not what we see today. That's not what King saw in his time, where we see people who, are struggling to live, that they're not only fighting for access to capital, they're fighting for access to live. And so what we want to present in the city of Jackson and the platform of guaranteed income, the platform of the Magnolia Mothers Trust, which is led by a sister named Aisha Ayandoro, and I want to make sure that I lift up her work. But it's all about this concept of building a dignity economy. We feel that our economy should reflect the inherent dignity of every single person. When economists study cities, when they study the economy of this nation, the problem with economists is that they don't study people. And so when we look at things like GDP, when we look at the work of cities and economic development and the building of great edifices, what we don't look at is the sustainable development goals, whether children have enough food on the table, what is the quality of our education, what is the support of our infrastructure, in that infrastructure, whether there's safe drinking water. All of these things are critical to truly determining the success and failure of an economy. And when families are living without the very basic necessities, we fail to recognize that households that are struggling just to make ends meet, when we fail to recognize the great power of the CEOs of the household who are trying to manage taking care of their children, and are struggling between whether or not they have the availability to go to the traditional workplace in that effort. Those are things that we have to consider as we look at the holistic components of what creates the best circumstances within our community.
As I said, I want to come back in just a little bit and talk about the influence that your parents had as being powerful community activists themselves. But first, I want to go to Columbia Mayor Steve Benjamin, because we've had these conversations about the dialogue, right? The words that are used. And the mayor just used the term democratic socialism. That we hear, after the protest over the summer, the phrase defund the police. Well, Mayor Benjamin, in your estimation, as we look at concepts of guaranteed income and some of these tools to fight poverty, how important are the words that we choose to use to describe these movements and these efforts? And what should we be mindful of? How do we frame that conversation, I guess, is really my question. Because I just, in journalism, so many labels are put out there, and labels get such a visceral response, and it's almost impossible to have an intellectually honest dialogue about what the concept is, what the problem is, and what the solutions are.
Yeah, it's incredibly, thank you so much, Judy. And obviously I love the formality of Chokwe and Vi right now. When I tell you that we speak by phone, email, text almost every day, I think that's fair to say. So there's a collegiality here and a sharing of ideas in spirit and love that hopefully emanates throughout the course of this conversation. The reality is that, and of all the things that Mayor Lumumba, as he always so beautifully and artistically articulates, I heard human dignity. I mean, I heard how is it that we finally own up to the reality that that this pandemic has laid bare for so many people. This pandemic has served as an X-ray of American society for people who chose not to pay attention before. It has shown a series of broken bones, whether it's around digital equity and access, or around the fact that access to healthcare is just not real in places all across our cities, and certainly in our rural economy. That the reality of someone doing better than their parents, and we watched the data since 1940, when 90% of us would do better than our parents were fully expected to do so, and the ladders were there, to watch that decline over time, so that now a minority of our children will do better than their parents. And we realize that not only is that real for all Americans, but it's profoundly real in communities of color, and certainly communities of color across the South, overlapping with our cities as well. And it's just a reality. So I love the fact that we're able, regardless of the labels that sometimes box us in, we're able to focus on real solutions, and we're able to share ideas. When when Mayor Lumumba talks about Magnolia Mothers, and obviously you reference the fact that we're part of Mayors for Guaranteed Income together, we came up with CLIMB, the Columbia Life Improvement Monetary Boost, almost mirroring, serving as a mirror to Magnolia Mothers. He focuses on mothers there, and you know our effort here focuses on a partnership with the Midlands Fatherhood Initiative, recognizing that the challenges that so many dads face when they're disconnected from their children, and if you can't put food on the table, or buy books when your kid needs them, or occasional pair of sneakers, it's amazing how this disconnection emerges, and how we've all seen the data. We know how it manifests itself in children's lives. So we learn from each other, and so I try. It's difficult, as I know your question suggests, in the world in which we live, where political discussions are just so tough every single day, to focus on the meat. And my friends, we know each other's politics on this call. I am radically pragmatic. Okay, I want to get something done that helps people. I don't mind going through the process of innovation or the process of iteration. Sometimes you'll try something, you'll fail. I don't mind listening to other ideas and stretching sometimes, but you got to try, and you got to realize that if you can lift up the least among us, then everyone benefits from it. And that's why obviously our theme and spirit for the last 12 years has been One Columbia. We're all going to rise together or fall together.
Well, it's important to consider as we really think about where we go from here, and the responsibility that each of us is willing to accept along that journey. Mayor Lyles, I want to come to you because over 60 years ago, Charlotte City Council approved an urban renewal program that literally devastated a Black neighborhood in Uptown Charlotte. And last year, you directly addressed the harm that the city government had on the Black community in the past, and pledged to continue to address racism with a collective and collaborative action, a call to action, really. So my question is this: what do you see as the local government's role in combating and addressing systemic racism, and how city governments can really work to fix the harm of the past?
Well, Judy, first, thanks for having me. I am a proud grown-up person from the Pinehurst community in Columbia, graduated from AC Flora, and at a time that there weren't many of us to be there in that school. So thank you for having me. Thank you for my fellow mayors here. It's always good to see each other and to share this information. So let me go to the question, though, about what's important and why it's important for government to happen. Yes, in the early 1970s, Charlotte actually destroyed a neighborhood that was the center of commerce, and the people that lived there didn't know that they were considered blight. And basically it was torn down under the urban renewal laws that the federal government permitted, the precursor to what we call community development today. And at the end of the day, when you look at the number of dislocations, just let me tell you just a story about this. That was where there was commerce, there was a downtown, there were the residential areas, but there was a huge faith community. And all of those churches were, faith community members, churches were given money to go elsewhere in the community, out into the suburbs. All of these folks were given opportunities to be basically lifted out of their homes and displaced into another location. But when the property was cleared and everything was done, the only house of worship that was allowed to rebuild in that neighborhood was a white Baptist church. So when we talk about what laws can do and what legislation can do, we've got to realize we've got to continue to push for change. So what do I do as mayor of Charlotte? In Charlotte, we have a practice of public-private partnerships. And when I say that, I mean publicly, we have to commit to doing something. And we have 7 corridors that were traditionally African-American that were failed from 1970 to today. And we created a fund called Opportunity Corridors, and we are beginning to reinvest, rebuild the center cities, the downtowns, the neighborhoods in each of those. It takes millions of dollars to do it, but that money, as Steve said, you you look at where you're spending your money and you realize you've not put it in the right places. And people in this community that vote for us, that pass our bond referendums, deserve that opportunity to have that money reinvested in their neighborhoods. We wouldn't be the city we are today if the Black people in this community hadn't voted for the opportunities that created our center city, created the opportunity for success. So I think that we have got an obligation to rethink how we spend tax dollars and reinvest in neighborhoods, to do things that are innovative. So we've begun to make loans to African-American developers to rebuild the downtowns of our Black communities. And it's working. It's not easy. It's not always going to be conventional. But we also have the private sector portion of it. And I went to the private sector and I said, you've got to support the people that allowed you to be successful. It's the same concept. We've got to support our HBCU, Johnson C. Smith University. We've got to support the development of Black people within these major institutions. So I've asked each of them, where do you recruit? What kind of pipeline do you have for people to be in your C-suite? And then the final thing that I asked them is to match what we're doing in the corridors of opportunity. I said, when you go to the bank for a loan, if you come in with a brown paper bag, the banker turns you away. That is not right. The banker has to say, let me see what's in that brown paper bag of receipts and tax returns. Do you have an idea? How do we make that idea a reality in our community? So instead of just kind of looking at the things the way we've always done them, we've got to turn this completely around and invest in people and invest in locations where people have gathered and where they have helped us be who we are today.
Have you found that as you make those arguments, that you're having to really, you're coming up against a lot of pushback and challenges, or are people receptive? I mean, how would you describe how difficult it has been to bring people on board to those ideas?
Actually, I have to say that part of it is that because we are a very fast growing city, because we have stable industry and a stable economy, it hasn't been very difficult. We've gone through the same kind of discussion that Tamika has led in Columbia. And we've done that a couple of years ago. We knew that we were 50th in upward mobility out of the top 50 cities in this country. So we have the data, we have the information. So basically you just have to have a plan. And I'm like Steve, very pragmatic, got to have a plan. But I went to them and I said, I'd like to see you match our $25 million with $25 million. And I hope to see that happen very soon.
Well, I think it's important that the match concept to always bring something to the table as you're making the ask of others. Mayor Lumumba, I want to go back to you because we mentioned earlier that you are the son of two powerful community activists, the late Chokwe Lumumba and Nubia Lumumba. Your father was a human rights lawyer and also served as the mayor of Jackson. So will you share a little bit about how what they instilled in you, how your family's legacy has informed your current work?
Absolutely, and I'm grateful to my parents' wisdom. My parents made a decision back in 1988 when I was about 5 years old. My father had a trial. First of all, we're originally from Detroit, Michigan. That's where I was born. My father had a case that lasted for 2 years in New York, in Brooklyn, New York. And at the conclusion of that trial, my parents decided that they wanted to move to the South. Ironically, my mother wanted to move to the Carolinas. We have no family in the Carolinas. She just, thought the Carolinas were beautiful. My father had done work in Mississippi, in Jackson, Mississippi, in the early 70s. And so he took the position that there was unfinished business in Mississippi and we needed to return to be a part of that work. And my parents felt that they could not shield their children from their activism. They felt that giving us a sense of not only family and community, but a sense of a value system of viewing the community as a family was just as important to us as giving us food, water, and shelter. And so I'm grateful for that decision, not only in the personal sense in which, while I have no family, no blood relatives in Mississippi other than my immediate family, the community by and large has become my family And it's really taught me the importance of the work that we're trying to do. Over time, we've learned lessons. We've understood that the community center that we ran for more than nearly 2 decades, that everyone was not going to come to the community center, and so we needed to meet people where they were, understanding that if you can only organize people who think like you, you're not much of an organizer. And so I think that precipitated my father's decision to enter into electoral politics, so that we can make a connection between many of the things that we spoke about and the common everyday struggles that people are facing. Because I am the son of 2 activists, I have the propensity to talk to some of the larger things in life, like human rights, self-determination, and exploitation. But I share with people that as I campaign, I invariably, I would run into a brother or sister and, talking about those things, and they would say, listen, yeah, that's good, young brother, but how are you going to fix that pothole in the middle of my street, right? And so I tell people that this discussion, while for some of the hardliners that are organizers, while a pothole may seem mundane, that's exactly what we must do. We must be able to connect pothole to pothole and community to community, so people in Jackson, Mississippi, understand why there is a community that looks just like theirs in Columbia, in Columbia, South Carolina, or in Charlotte, South Carolina, or Detroit, Michigan. And in the process of fixing that pothole, what we learn is that the pothole was never your problem in the first place. Your problem is that you don't control the decision-making process that leads to a pothole being fixed. Your problem is that you don't control the curriculum that educates your children. Your problem is that you don't have as much influence on the economic development that takes place in your community. And so your problem is a fundamental one. Your problem is that you lack the self-determination to determine the quality of life that you so justly deserve and desire. And so in this work, I think that there's a larger mission in frame that we have to consider. Yes, we have to be able to do the normal blocking and tackling that our residents expect for us to do, but we have to also face these historic inequities that our communities face time and time again.
So very true. And so often in these conversations, it can feel like you're preaching to the choir, in that goal that you mentioned about being able to resonate and bring some consensus and understanding and engagement with people outside of that circle that typically agree, with your positions and that you're taking on these issues. Mayor Benjamin, I want to come back to you. Recent reports have shown that upwards of 40% of Black-owned businesses have been closed as a result of COVID-19. Talk to us a little bit about what you have been working on here in the city of Columbia to assist those businesses while also keeping the city safe.
Absolutely, Judy. I'm going to yield about 90 seconds of my time back to Mayor Lumumba, because he talked about his daddy doing some work in Jackson. Say a little bit about your daddy's work in Jackson, because you kind of glossed over it like it was like he was fixing pipes or something. Talk a little bit about that.
He opened an office and that was all. They came as they wanted to. No.
I find his work all across the country empowering in so many different ways. We'll talk a little bit more about your dad and his work.
Yeah, well, interesting. The evolution of my father's work from the time that he first came to Jackson. He was a part of an organization which, at that time in the 70s, took a radical approach to things, confronted government, confronted many of the institutions in power that led to Black communities being oppressed in Mississippi. I don't think I have to go through all of that history, but it was part of an organization called the Republic of New Africa that was seeking to create a space for self-determination, a space by which Black communities could develop culture for themselves, develop economic opportunities for themselves, which culminated, my father was not present at this time, but it culminated in a shootout with the police in the 70s when he was in Detroit at that time. And so that's what saved him from being prosecuted, led to unjust prosecution of the individuals who were involved. The police did a raid on the house of the organization at that time, and then charged them with conspiracy to shoot a police officer when they raided with a tank on the house itself. And so to see him evolve from that point of that very strong radical past to, one day becoming the mayor of the city of Jackson was truly quite a climb. And quite a distance to travel. But you know, being a part of work as a criminal defense attorney, representing so many defendants that both well known and not as well known, in order to give them the opportunities that they deserve towards, you know, just representation. Having represented everyone from Tupac Shakur and Lance Parker, who was one of the individuals charged in the Reginald Denny assault during the LA riots, to individuals that most people wouldn't know. You know, supporting the push to charge the state with the murder of Andre Jones and Johnny Griffin, individuals who were killed under police brutality and under, you know, a police state. And so his work spanned quite the gambit. And you know, my mother was equally an activist, a cultural activist in her own right. That you know, he would not have been able to do any of that without her support and her hard work. And often she was the one directing things from behind the scenes. So I don't want to leave her out.
Not by any means whatsoever.
Yeah.
Mayor Benjamin.
I'm gonna shorten my answer, but I thought it was important because every time Mayor Lumumba speaks about his dad, and it's particularly when we had the fortunate ability to be together physically, I think a lot of us were so inspired by his work and his leadership. I just wanted to lift that up. So thank you, brother.
I'm glad you did. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The reality is that we have these opportunities as leaders of municipal corporations and we can use this bully pulpit to try and push through our policies and our financial decisions, as Mayor Lyles said. We can push equity through our budgets. You know, we often laugh about Tamika and I, Councilwoman Devine. The fact is that we are the city with the state's largest water sewer authority. A few years ago, when we really started investing over $500 million, almost $750 million, we became the largest water sewer system that happened to own a city. It is the vast majority of our budget now. So we decided that we were going to make sure that as we spent those hard-earned public tax dollars and ratepayer dollars, that we're going to make sure that every single dollar that we spent, that we're going to try to push it back into the community, not just the infrastructure improvements that Mayor Lumumba talked about earlier, but every single deal that we've done. We've had African-American bond counsel and underwriters council. We've had African-American financial advisors and investment banks on every single deal. We've worked aggressively, even when we built Segregated Park, to make sure that over 40% of that construction was done with African-American owned businesses. And as we respond to this existential threat of the pandemic, particularly as it relates to businesses all across this country and African-American owned businesses across this country, without even talking about the healthcare threat, we've made sure that we stood up the Resilient Columbia Economic Sustainability Plan, that over 40% of those dollars, that the millions of dollars we put out as a city as an immediate stopgap measure to help small businesses, that also went to local, small, a significant number of women-owned businesses and African-American-owned businesses as well. It has to become a part of what you do every single day, part of your DNA, that you're making sure, and we have a great team in place that makes sure that we hold ourselves accountable when we're using the limited funds in the public trust, and it's become part of our DNA.
Well, and another part, what you touched on, talking about the challenges that we're dealing with the pandemic right now, I think it's so critical when we talk about these inequities, whether it's in business or in healthcare, because another inequity that we're seeing play out right now is that this pandemic has been so devastating on Black communities, on minority communities, in terms of the cases, in terms of exposure as frontline workers, and in terms of deaths. But access to the vaccine for minorities is woefully low. So Mayor Lyles, I'll come back to you. What do we need to be thinking about in terms of a community to help right those wrongs? I mean, we're witnessing this in real time. So many times, you know, we'll bring up instances of different things where we feel like, you know, think things were not fair, they were not just, and you know, people will argue and have these, you know, debates back and forth about whether racism really exists, and you know, all of these different things. But we're watching this in real time, that vaccines during a pandemic are not getting to the people who have been most severely impacted. What kinds of questions do we need to be asking? What kind of action do we need to be taking?
That's a great question, and it's so timely right now. Judy, I have to say that most of us that have been in government and had to work with people, we knew that this healthcare disparity happened many, many years ago. And the thing about it is that when you look at how many federally funded healthcare clinics there are and how many hospital systems there are, you can tell just by the geographic location that there's the disparity. You can tell by the number of clinics that you can walk into that they basically become private sector type operations. They're businesses more than they are what I would consider a healthcare system for the people. And in Charlotte, what we've had to do is really push our healthcare systems to recognize that people don't want to have a car to get a doctor's appointment or to a doctor's appointment. Just this past week, we opened up our football stadium, the Panthers Stadium, along with Honeywell and our largest healthcare system to have vaccinations for up to, I believe we did 8,000 people in a day. The first clinic that we had was almost like you had to call the government and get an appointment. The system crashed in the first 10 minutes. So no appointments required. City buses that go from the corridors where African Americans live take people to the stadium. These are the kinds of things you have to begin to think about what's different and what we need to do to get those vaccines done. But I also want to say this. We can't look at this as just a one-time event. I believe COVID is our pandemic of the moment, but we have to take the lessons that we've learned from this pandemic and prepare, hopefully not any time soon, for the next one. But we also need to use this pandemic and the COVID experience to improve what we have. I would hope that all healthcare, all hospital systems look at how they locate and place their facilities, how they create doctor practices that have access to for people that need it based upon their income. We need more federally funded health clinics. These are all practical solutions that will keep all of us healthier and will, I think, impact the future of pandemics as we see them come in the future.
Mayor Lumumba, how are you addressing health disparities in your community? As we've seen the vaccine rollout, I've literally had people tell me, well, people in rural communities can just drive to the city, and they take for granted that people even have a car. I mean, we have some counties that don't even have a major hospital, so there's a major disconnect. How are you addressing some of those disparities?
Well, first and foremost, I would like to express that what is happening, I'm sure in Charlotte and happening in Columbia is happening also in Jackson. In fact, amongst those that are vaccinated, only 15% of those vaccinated are African American thus far in the state of Mississippi. And so what we have learned is that we are the cavalry that we've been waiting for. And so in many instances, we had to author solutions in the midst of the pandemic where we were not either receiving state or federal support. Often I was lacking even communication with the state, in spite of the fact that Jackson is the largest city by a factor of 3, and also not only the state capital, but the capital of healthcare. And so what we did was, we purchased our own test when the period in which testing was really critical, as it still is, even though we have a vaccine, so that we could infuse our community with far more, with a greater ability to test. We created convalescence rooms where people who once they contracted the virus, but were unable to safely quarantine, either because they had loved ones who were vulnerable or not having a home at all. And so we created those spaces. We created a warm line, and we created a warm line to deal with the emotional distress and strain that people in the community were facing, which was populated by credible messengers, not only clinical psychologists and social workers, but we had our pastors to step up so that they could be the bridge that connected those people to the social services that they needed. We created a symptom collector, which enabled us to track where the virus was most prevalent within our community, at a time when we were not having data shared with us so that we could understand on a census tract level where that was taking place. And we met with the response of having mobile testing units in those areas. And so that's, that's our story, but it's not unlike the story of my friends that are on this call, not unlike the story of so many leaders within our communities that have had to author the solutions to the challenges that we've seen. The pandemic, COVID, has not come here in order to discriminate over one community from one community over the next. What it has done is expose where we already have inequities. It has exposed the challenges in our healthcare system that have always existed, whether that is access to healthcare facilities, whether that is the ability to have credible messengers who are within the medical profession that give our community the confidence that they need, whether it's access to insurance. I tell people that if voting rights was the battle of the 20th century, then access to healthcare has to be the battle of the 21st. And I don't think that there has ever been a moment that has underscored that point more than the last 12 months that we've suffered in COVID.
Thank you for that insight. So on point there. I'm checking the time. I think we have about 10 minutes or so left for our panel discussion. I just want to remind the audience joining us tonight that we'll be opening it up for their questions shortly. So they'll be able to add those questions into the chat form, and we'll take them to all of our panelists and cover as much ground as we can. I want to completely shift gears for another big issue that has been such a challenge for so many cities. And I'd like to hear from each of you on this. Mayor Benjamin, I'll start with you, because here in Columbia, just like cities across the country, really, there is such a struggle in terms of providing affordable housing, just a shortage of affordable housing in our communities. Talk a little bit about what that issue looks like here in Columbia and what you see as part of the solution in addressing it.
Thank you, Judy. No, I think the approach has to be as diverse and multifaceted as you possibly can. I mean, the reality is that the power of the flow of capital is an amazing thing to try and control. And you've got to try to use every single tool in your toolbox, from the prescriptive tools around zoning to the incentive tools to try and encourage people to invest in that space. We passed policies and made funds available to try and incentivize everything from senior-oriented housing that manifests itself in the veranda on North Main Street and the new, I think it's Pointed Elmwood that we just developed right in front of Second Nazareth Church. Mm-hmm. The primary tool that most affordable housing has been used to develop in our state has been the low-income housing tax credit. A very small amount of money that we've tried to mirror that success by using what's called the 4% tax credit, by trying to incentivize what we really want to see, which is as opposed to what we developed 40, 50, 60 years ago, we want to see mixed income, mixed use housing that has all the resources and amenities that you'd find in any community, in any part of the city. And we're seeing some success in some of those projects that I just mentioned. Our greatest success, however, has been some of the programs that we've used in great partnership with a number of our banking partners. A lot of folks don't know that we have about $125 million portfolio of loans that we've used community development block grant funding, which is, as the mayors will tell you, we like having grant monies coming from HUD. This is not HUD's money. This is your money. This is taxpayer dollars that we send to DC every April 15th, and it comes back home repatriated to us. And we use those funds we have over the last several years to help incentivize people who are at 80% or below the area median income to get into homes with as little as no down payment or as much as maybe $500 out of it. It is developed an amazing program that has people buying homes all across the city. And what I love about this program is that the default rate is lower than a traditional mortgage default rate. People get into these homes, take care of their homes, build their neighborhoods, and pay their debts. So these ideas about what affordable housing means. And we were able to, just a couple of years ago, you may remember, as part of our Justice for All plan, to modify the program, pay a residency bonus to our police officers so that they're able to get into this program without any down payment and move into the communities that they actually serve. which is so important as opposed to feeling like they have to go out into the rural areas or the burbs. Actually having our officers live in the communities that they try to keep safe. So it takes constant creativity, and I watch Mayor Lumumba and Mayor Lyles. Mayor Lyles has more money than me and Chokwe put together times 20 up in Charlotte. She ain't got nothing but money up there, and she's doing some amazing things up there around affordable housing that I believe in. And I will tell you, I'll have to raise up Tamika Devine's work in the space of affordable housing. She's been hammering, and leading an amazing task force right now in that space. I think is going to yield some great fruit for the people of Columbia.
Fantastic. Well, Mayor Lyles, he gave us the perfect segue to come and talk about the initiatives in Charlotte. Even if you do have more money than the two of them put together, you have to know what to do with it. And when we talk about affordable housing, it really is the foundation for helping families to lift themselves up out of poverty.
Well, actually, we do everything that Steve mentioned that Columbia does. It is the foundation. When you have that money that is a tax credit, it works for you. But I tell you, sometimes this is what frustrates me. You know, housing is not looked at as something that's necessary for a great community. And I say the foundation of any great community is having a decent job that allows you to have a house in a great neighborhood. It doesn't have to mean that it's, you know, a wealthy neighborhood. It just needs to be a place that's safe with infrastructure and lighting. And so our housing efforts are based around our neighborhood efforts. But a couple of things that we're doing, I think that I'm really proud of. One, we have an endowment so that people that are in very difficult circumstances, women coming out of domestic violence situations, that we will actually provide a subsidy for their unit, a city subsidy, an endowment with money that we put in with the private sector, that we will pay their rent for up to 2 years till they can get on their feet and they can get the jobs that they need. And then at the end of 2 years, there's a reassessment. What do you need? And there's always someone working with you, a counselor that works with you to make sure that you don't fail. Because so many times we think, well, you know, we give somebody a place and that means that they know exactly what to do. It can be overwhelming to go from homelessness to housing without some assistance and help. The other thing that I think that we're beginning to realize is that there is a lot of publicly owned property. And we're going to, we have actually had people donate over 25 acres of land inside of the city because there are people that have the ability to do that. And I asked them to do that. And then we plan a community, we plan a neighborhood for that property, and we go ahead and develop it. So we're doing public development. But I think the most successful area that we've had that I'm most proud of, it's where we have people that would ordinarily be in providing that public assistance. When we have major rezonings, we ask that they include housing units for people that are 30% and below in income. We often have to negotiate. Sometimes it goes all the way up to 80, but as long as they're at the table, getting the development community at the table and holding them accountable. Again, Charlotte is the city it is because of the people that have lived here. And those people, the people that have helped us, the diverse jobs that we have, need to provide diverse points of housing, and developers need to recognize that and implement it in their housing. So over the past 3 years, we've put together 1,000 units per year. And my goal would be that we get that to 2,000 per units per year of city-owned housing, not counting what you get from the federal government or from all of these other places. But to me, you cannot have a safe and diverse city with people of all walks of life if you can't provide safe and diverse housing for everyone from all of those walks of life.
Thank you so much. Mayor Lumumba, what do the solutions to affordable housing look like in your community?
Well, I think that both Mayor Benjamin and Mayor Lyles did an excellent job in laying out the blueprint and you know, the mechanisms and the tools that we use in order to create you know, fair and equitable housing. I think in addition, and I do appreciate Mayor Benjamin's mentioning that it also has to look like mixed income housing. And you know, that really enables us to avoid many of the social trappings that our communities often find themselves in. What I would like to lift up, and one thing that we have taken a bold stance on as administration is the statement that we are adamantly opposed to gentrification. While we want all people of goodwill and sincerity that want to live in our city and join us to come along and be a part, we have to understand that we can't, that first and foremost, gentrification is a war against people. It moves people from one state of misery to the next. And instead of pushing people away, our mission must be to lift them up. And so we're very intentional in how we create programs, whether we're dealing with blight elimination programs that lead into development within communities, that we incentivize and find ways to help with wealth management, wealth building, and creating opportunity for those people who have for generations grown up in those communities to be able to maintain in those communities. And I think that that's very important that we lift up. When we talk about our cities and our love for our cities, it's more about the people than it is a matter of latitude and longitude. And so to see true progress, it has to be an endeavor in which we're able to lift people up in that regard.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Mayor Lyles, I want to come back to you and then Mayor Benjamin before we open it up to Q&A from our audience on that issue of gentrification. How do you believe, Mayor Lyles, that city governments can be effective in addressing that?
Well, we have a program particularly for seniors that are living in communities where people are bombarding them with postcards and phone calls to say, we want to buy your property. When we have an educational campaign to let them know that they don't have to actually answer those phone calls. They don't have to look at those postcards. But our program that we really work on is we reduce their property tax liability. We have an exemption for them, and we help them with their tax payments so that they don't feel the pressure that they have to move because the land has grown so much in value. So we try to offset that to keep them whole. And that's absolutely so important for our community. The other part that we have is that we really do discourage development that is based upon taking people's property and making it a new neighborhood without incorporating the neighborhood. So the idea of how to do that is to actually have active citizen engagement. We have a team of people that just work with neighborhoods that are in these situations where they're beginning to see change coming. And then we send out organizers, city organizers, to help them create a plan for what they want to do. We encourage neighborhoods to have block leaders to have these kinds of discussions so people aren't afraid that they're going to lose their home because of the taxes or that they have to sell it because someone tells them that they have to. The worst experience I've had is where a family sold their house because they paid, let's say, $80,000 for it. They were offered $120,000, and they sold it because they thought that was such a great value. And that property was actually worth almost $250,000 at the time. And if you take that the equation and let people make that decision, but I tell you, the real estate industry is tough and hard, and they push. And we've got to protect people. These are people that live in our city, and we have to protect them from that.
Thank you so much, Mayor Benjamin.
No, thank you so much for that question. And I got to tell you, I've always hated the term gentrification. I always have, because let me tell you what, the process of something being more refined or polite or respectable. I know a whole lot of folks who've never had any money to talk about, who got a whole lot more class than people with money, a whole lot more class, but the concept is something that I've always struggled with, because obviously as a mayor, we always seek to try and push more wealth into our communities. And the greatest challenge I believe that we have, and you'll see it in some of our communities, like say folks in the call will know I'm talking about Greenview. The Greenview community is rich and deep, a neighborhood as significant to African American culture in this city as any place else in the state is. Wonderful housing stock and incredible people. What we've tried to do is we've tried to invest in the public infrastructure, the types of things that make people want to live in the Greenview community, the Greenview Park, a water park, and everything else. The goal is to try and attract families back to Greenview, children who left, who usually will go out to the Northeast or Northwest or what have you, and try to find ways to bring more families back into the city. Because I've always struggled with, and this is something that's not necessarily an intellectual challenge, but when you have that mother or father, oftentimes it can be the grandmother or widow that Vi just referenced, who has spent 30 years or 40 years paying off a mortgage of a home that they built in the 60s or 70s. They finally get an opportunity because no one's coming home. The kids and the grandkids are not coming back to the home, which I think there needs to be a strategy to try and bring more people back into the city. If she gets the opportunity to finally cash out, to finally get the $250,000 check by, not the $100,000 check, and then we have really nice new senior housing in the neighborhood, so people are able to age in place in their own communities, not go out across the river or to the other county or somewhere where they're not near their friends, getting with the love and the socialization that we all need. We have to be able to put systems in place. We're talking about ecosystem solutions that allow that grandmother, that grandfather to get there just doing their payday like everybody else, making sure that they're taken care of, they're protected in this process, and that they have real options, some of that affordable housing we talked about, to age in place in an active senior community. But we've got to create ways to bring more, just being frank, more people of color back into the urban core. And that takes some nonstop creativity that has eluded many cities. But I will tell you the process of constant innovation to try and make it happen. Mayor Lyles and Mayor Lumumba and I, we speak with Mayor Woodfin in Birmingham and Mayor Bottoms in Atlanta, Mayor Perkins in Shreveport, Mayor Carter in St. Paul. We're constantly sharing the very best ideas at Topeka, Kansas, just trying to figure out how to make things better. But this is a challenge. This is a massive that we have to work together to try and solve.
I want to open up the forum to questions from our audience joining us online. And for our panelists, I want you to keep our theme in mind. Where do we go from here? So as we answer the questions from the audience, and I may have a few other questions to throw in as well, I want to hear from you the action that or responsibility you think that we as individuals need to be willing to contemplate and accept, and maybe even a challenge of the things that we need to consider, the actions that we need to take to really help our communities move forward. If we can frame our answers with keeping that theme in mind, that would be really wonderful. I'm going to call on Jennifer Melton, who's keeping an eye on those questions coming in. Jennifer, thank you for your help with this great forum tonight. It has been such a rich conversation so far. Any questions from our viewers this evening?
We do, and actually to your point, Judy, about what we as citizens can do, our first question speaks to that. It's from April Jones, who is from the Pinehurst neighborhood, Mayor Lyles, so Mayor area. And she says, what can citizens do to create equitable policies in housing?
Well, since I'm from Pinehurst, I'll just start off. I think one of the things that citizens can do is create neighborhood organizations. Be organized and aware of what's going on around you and cooperate together to talk about what kind of neighborhood. Steve did a great job talking about the idea of how do you make sure that your seniors are cared for, how to work with the city to say, we have this neighborhood that we want to preserve. What do we need? Do we need more sidewalks? Do we need more tree plantings? All of these things that would make the neighborhood better. The power of organization cannot be dismissed. It's a lot better when you come in and say, we have a neighborhood association, we've worked on a plan and we need your help, versus coming in and saying, well, my garbage didn't get picked up this week. That's the kind of change that I think neighbors and as individuals can do. Just looking out for each other and having a plan together to make your neighborhood the kind of place that you want to live.
Mayor Benjamin, would you like to, well, Mayor Lumumba, I see that you raised your hand. Would you like to weigh in on that?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I can't agree with Vi any more than what she has said. I think that I think our citizens need to realize that their responsibility extends beyond the ballot box. And 3 minutes at a city council meeting does not equal 3 minutes on a microphone at a city council meeting does not equal community participation. And so what we've tried to incorporate is the ability to try to democratize power. So we have quarterly people's assemblies that rotate in various areas across the city, which is intended to be an information exchange. It's an opportunity where the city's leadership can come before the community and share what are the big ticket items, or what are the areas of hot areas of discussion that we need to confront. But it's also an opportunity for us to be educated back by the community and understand how the community sees it from its vantage point. It also extends as a pressure initiative where the community holds us accountable. I think that we have to revolutionize the way we see electoral politics. It should no longer be a means by which someone expresses political ambition, tells us how they're going to do all these amazing things on our behalf, only to find that they're neither capable of doing that and maybe not sincere in some regard. And so the community has to draft its agenda and also nominate or draft the individuals that represent that agenda. And so I think that that's important. One of the most important functions we have in government is the construction of a budget. A budget is a moral document. It reflects the values of our community. And so we've created a participatory budgeting process where we literally created a monopoly game that reflected the dollars and whether it was through grant funds that the city is given each year, so that we could move on that monopoly board how we wanted to see the money dispersed, no longer scratching where people aren't itching.
Fantastic. Jennifer, another question from our audience?
Jennifer's on mute.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, thank you.
I think 10 months into a pandemic, I would know how to unmute myself by now. This question is about school districts from Kendra DeWalt. What might be immediate solutions to levy resources to communities who cannot economically support building and sustaining competitive schools in their zone districts? How might we re-envision distributing resources to prepare all of our students, whatever their zip code?
Mayor Benjamin, would you like to tackle that?
Sure. I'd start with the idea that maybe even when we started this conversation, I think the first question was about mayors for a guaranteed income. When I tell people that obviously we passed bond referenda after bond referendum, we have quality schools. We have amazing teachers and educators all across this community. When we have some very talented administrators, what we have also is a significant number of our children who come to school not ready to learn, because those children are dealing with issues that they ought not have to deal with. They're dealing with adult issues. They're worried about issues that I didn't have to worry about as a child. I didn't have to worry about where my next meal was coming from. I didn't have to worry about shelter and safety and security and gunshots and all the other myriad issues that our children are dealing with right now. So we have to make sure that our babies come to school ready to learn. And quite frankly, in the age of the pandemic, we know that there's significant numbers of children in each of our cities who we don't know if their first meal of the day, breakfast or a lunch, is actually happening because of this disconnection that we have in our schools. So we've got to understand that the issue is not the school building or even I would say the technology, because our school districts have made sure that that's available. It's about the condition that we're sending our children to school and the conditions that they're living in as we speak every single day. And I believe it goes back from the first question to the last question. The last question is we need active and aggressive citizen leadership that recognizes that you don't need a title to be a leader. And indeed, I think if nothing else, the greatest benefit of technology right now, it has leveled the playing field. I mean, it is given some problems. It's given some people both anonymity and reach, but it has truly democratized the way in which people can engage with their government. We don't have to wait for Walter Cronkite to show up at 6 p.m. and tell everybody what's happening in the world. You can literally drive a narrative with a thoughtful, well-placed tweet or message on some other type of social media nowadays. But it requires that your activism has to be followed by real action. It has to be followed by real leadership. And we believe that activism without action is just a conversation. So I would just encourage people that while we hold our elected leaders accountable the way that Mayor Lumumba and Mayor Lyles just spoke about, we don't have to wait on our elected officials to lead. We can do it on our own, on the local level, without active elected officials, if it's not happening in our space.
You're reminding me of comments from one of our esteemed pastors in our community, Dr. Charles Jackson Sr., as we witnessed the protest play out over the last year, who said, protest without action really is just a parade. So it all is about the responsibility, that we are willing to accept for the action that is required to improve our community. I want to cover as much ground as we can, Jennifer, so I'm going to come back to you and get as many questions as we can in the time that we have left.
Okay, we talked earlier about the COVID pandemic's disproportionate impact on people of color. This question speaks to that as well. From Allard Alston, the COVID pandemic's long-term economic impact is likely to restructure entry-level job prospects for a significant percentage of each of your citizens. Are there any insights on how your economic development efforts will have to adjust to accommodate this?
Anybody want to tackle that?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. Thanks. It's a really good question. It's one that I'm dealing with right now. And my thinking on that is to think about what the new jobs will be after this pandemic. Where will they be taking place? What kind of industries need to be relocated there? But it's not just about looking for the jobs. What I'm trying to work on now is a strategic talent plan, so that we match the work that we're doing in our community colleges, our universities, as well as our public schools, to the jobs that are going to be good paying jobs and the talent that's going to be needed by the people to make the city continue to thrive economically. And so in this situation, I think change is coming, and we're going to have to prepare for that change. And that change means we have to think about the talent and the workforce that we're building now, the people that are now in middle school and high school, and what they're going to do when they graduate, and look at other opportunities, apprenticeship programs. Our efforts are now singly focused on creating jobs in the climate change industry, getting people that understand that you can build solar farms, solar farms are a place where you can develop a talent and have a great career. So those are the kinds of things that I think we have to think about.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that, Mayor Benjamin?
Yeah, I'll say this, and I'll say it fast. Everything that Vi just said is right on point. We're watching trends. We had a wonderful study with the African American Managers Association, Howard University, and Harvard University, looking at the future of work that we conducted just over a year ago. And we watched trends, looking at the way that advanced machine learning and automation and AI is changing the workforce, how 65 to 70% of our kindergartners will work in jobs and fields that don't even exist now, how the pandemic has accelerated that. It's brought 2030 to 2021. And so we're gonna have to continue to be just as creative as possible, creating jobs where they know they will be, but we're gonna have to commit ourselves to a future of lifelong learning. It's gonna be work, learn, work, learn, work, learn, because the world is just gonna change so rapidly around us.
And Mayor Lumumba, as I talk about the jobs aspect, it comes to mind that, it's also a challenge that we need to accept in terms of helping minority and small-owned businesses to make the pivot. We've heard so much about the pivot, right, over the course of the last year in dealing with the pandemic, because the business models, that have worked so well for them, in those communities have not been conducive during a pandemic, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, that's what I was going to add, that we've increased our focus on the support of minority businesses. We've been able to establish some partnerships with some philanthropic organizations. The Heron Foundation is helping to support the rewriting of code that helps provide opportunities for minority businesses within the city of Jackson. We have the support of Goldman Sachs and Hope Community Credit Union that have selected 7 cities across the nation, and is giving access to $2 billion worth of capital to support minority businesses. And lastly, a part of that trifecta of philanthropic support. We have the Rockefeller Foundation that is actually supporting some of the business development and planning for those particular businesses. So that's important. I tell people that especially for my city, that helping minority businesses isn't a matter of color. It isn't a matter of race. If 85% of your population is left-handed, then you need some left-handed jobs. And so that's how we see the importance of supporting minority businesses in our community. I do want to add, in addition to that, we do need to look at the future of work. And one of the things that we've been looking at, not only as a support of our education system, but also as a support of our economic development, is that we're trying to continue the building of one of the strongest and the fastest municipal broadband networks in the southern region. The city of Jackson had the benefit after Katrina of having dark fiber laid in the ground, but we really have never taken the opportunity to take advantage of it in any real sense. And so we recently reached an agreement with a company called Cogent, which is a long haul provider of internet access, so that we're no longer simply a purchaser of internet, but can be a supplier, a seller of internet. So we want to create space where in certain communities which are without access to internet, which can't afford internet, that we can create areas where we have hotspots that our young people can learn at no cost, and also look at it as a means of economic development. We are blessed with the brilliance of a young Jacksonian, a young lady by the name of Nashley Cephas, who created an algorithm that she sold to Amazon, which allows people to search products by using their phone just to take a picture of it. She made a good bit of money, and now she's creating a tech district in the city of Jackson. So we're really focusing on the future of work as well.
I use that feature on Amazon frequently.
Okay.
I'm glad to know the connection. Jennifer, let's try and get in as many questions as we can in the next few minutes. For our panelists, we'll try and do some rapid fire answers to cover as much ground. We appreciate everybody joining us this evening. What do you have for us, Jen?
So I know we talked about gentrification, but I've gotten a few follow-up questions about that.
Okay.
One from Cassandra Elliott. Having just moved back into my family home in a predominantly African-American community, and seeing big developers on the horizon, how do we establish dialogue with the powers that be, especially since we are so close to USC Stadium and student housing being established? She's talking specifically about the Bluff Road and Shop Road corridor that has been home to 6 African-American communities for the last 30 to 50 years. And then we got a question on Facebook that was similar about Booker Washington Heights.
Yeah, so amazingly powerful and influential communities, I'd say, in that area as well. I would ask you to actually reach out directly to me and Ms. Devine to start that conversation, to make sure that you're an active part of all decisions that are happening down there. There's a desire to see some development in the area, literally on the other side of the railroad tracks that we've actually not supported as a city council. But Stephen with the PH, .benjamin@columbiasc.gov. Let's get that conversation started. And we remain constantly, my sister Regina A. Williams keeps us on point on Booker Washington Heights. So we want to keep that conversation going too.
We thank her very much for that question. Jen, any more questions in our forum?
Yes, we have a question about, we talked about what can citizens do, but one question here is from Evan Wessel. What would you like to see the federal government do in partnership with cities to address the racial segregation of our neighborhoods and to invest in Black communities, particularly in cities in the South?
Mayor Lyles?
Well, I'd like for them to send the money back that we paid them in our taxes to the communities where decisions are made locally based on the needs of the people that are on the ground, where there are not requirements for us to go through huge amounts of grant applications and directives, but they actually trust that neighborhoods and people that live in our cities can make good decisions by having their plans implemented. I say that in a joking, half joking kind of way, but in some respects, what I would really like for the federal government to do is to recognize that they take the money from the Treasury And they often put treasury money, the treasury is responsible for housing instead of like HUD sometimes. And I'd really like for them to understand the connection between the economics at the federal level and the economics for urban communities. We really struggle with this urban-rural divide, but urban communities are at a core, going to what Mayor Lumumba said, if you do have the digital divide and you don't have the digital ability to provide the ability for internet service and broadband services to the rural areas, then nobody's going to win. Everybody's going to be in a situation where we're going to lack the ability to change this world in the way that we look at and access and internet requirements. And that is one of the things that we really need from the federal government, to either embrace a national broadband program or to provide the ability for a state or a city to be able to create a regional plan to do that. So those are the kinds of things that I think the federal government could help us do.
Great insight. Jan, let's try and get in one or two more questions.
So this question from McCone Campbell, especially for, and somebody else asked a similar question to Mayor Lyles, when you talk about developing the corridors in Charlotte and other areas here, how do we ensure that Black and Brown people are not priced out of the areas where development or redevelopment is starting to occur?
Well, for us, one of the ways that we ensure that is that we really request minority developers to come to the table, and we work with them individually to get things done, managing the control of the property, managing the development of the property. But I also want to say that most of our corridors like this, they don't want to look like our center city. They don't want skyscrapers. They want to have what they want to have. And we try to have a development plan by land use planning to give those communities what they want. So if they want a downtown area and it's going to be no more than 3 stories, we try to zone for those things that implements their plan. But I also want to say that we have to make sure that the people that are living there can still afford to live there. So we're doing a lot of renovation of existing housing, but keeping people in that housing that makes it affordable so that they don't have to move. So it's an interesting dilemma, but it really does take reaching out and changing the way that, America is often like, well, we have to compete. We have to have the lowest bid. We have to give everybody a chance. Well, no, we don't. We don't have to give everybody a chance. Everybody has never had a chance. So in this case, we're making a choice of who we're going to work with.
May I say something real quick, Judy, and I'll keep it tight, because
Okay.
it's guys, Mayor Lyles' last comment was something Mayor Lumumba said very, very early on. It's amazing the key performance indicators that we look at when we determine whether or not the economy in America is healthy. Wall Street, for some reason, the stock market has for the last 40 years been that measure, and it means nothing to people on the ground, with the exception of maybe a Reddit-infused run on GameStop or AMC. But when Wall Street is healthy, it means nothing about what's happening on your street, as our friend I.S.C.V. Johnson might say at times. And we've wound up with a system in this country in which, if you look at the Paycheck Protection Plan or what have you, where money runs out of the doors of our treasury and it goes into the pockets of the wealthiest. So we wind up with socialism for the wealthy. And we ask for capitalism for everybody else, and that is not the way in which you build truly equitable communities. So the question that Evan Wessel asked earlier is that we've got to make sure that this money, when it's repatriated back to our cities, it goes into local solutions. While there's a lot of similarities, the challenges that Vi and Chokwe are facing in their communities are different and unique, and there need to be local solutions to those problems, and that comes in the forms of community development block grants. The answer to the question is either pass the $1.9 trillion plan and let it come right down to mayors, or go back and pass the HEROES Act and give us the resources to get things done on the ground in a meaningful way.
I love it. I mean, this conversation could go on all night. It has been such a pleasure for me to be able to moderate this conversation. Before I hand it back over to Councilwoman Tamika Isaac Devine, I want to hear in 30 seconds or less, so that we can stay on time, what your challenge is to our audience, because I keep coming back to that issue of responsibility. We have a responsibility to be involved in the communities that we care about. And that's showing up on election day, of course, but it's also being involved in the decisions that are made between each election day. So I'd like to start with Mayor Lyles in 30 seconds or less. What is your challenge for us tonight?
My challenge is that if you live in this community, feel like you own it. Feel the love, a tangible love for the place that you are, and just build on that love. If you build on the idea of engagement and commitment, we can't do anything but good things.
Mayor Benjamin?
I tell people to realize that each and every one of us is a leader. The reality is that some of the greatest advances made, not just in human society, but certainly in this country, in this state, and in this city, was led by normal people, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. That you have amazing gifts that God's giving each and every one of you. Take control of your community and make it better for each and every one of us.
And Mayor Lumumba.
As we've taken to the streets, recognizing the need for social justice in so many ways within our communities, let's not make that the parade that you mentioned, but let's turn it into action. I charge young people who have been at the forefront of many of these protests that we concretize this moment, take it from its mystical, mysterious place into an organized fashion that truly sees the change that we so justly deserve.
Well, thank you each for your time this evening. Thank you for your thoughtful insights, and thank you for your willingness to serve our communities and to be a role model to our children about what is possible when one is willing to step up and lead. It has been a pleasure to moderate the conversation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Columbia City Councilwoman Tamika Isaac Devine.
Thank you so much, Judy. You did an amazing job as always. And you're right, this conversation could have gone on for another hour. I know that there are several questions in the question and answer box that we did not get to. There were questions about transportation, housing, some more about broadband. And so I challenge each of you, or invite each of you to, as the mayor said, email the mayor, email myself. Jennifer Melton will be monitoring and writing those down. And if we did not get to your question, I promise you, we will get back in touch with you with an answer. To Mayor Lumumba, Mayor Lyles, Mayor Benjamin, thank you so much for not only your service to your communities in this country, but in being really true servant leaders. The passion that you all brought to this conversation was very clear and apparent that with innovative mayors like you, with bold mayors like you, we will be able to address the problems in our communities, because you have not just the vision and foresight, but you also have the courage to step out there and do something outside the box. So I thank you for taking time, because I know you are all super busy. I know Mayor Benjamin, his daughter, my goddaughter, is turned 16 today. So I gratefully thank you so much for taking time, because we know that that's very important. So please give Bethy happy birthday and love from all of us. And thank you for being here. I have to thank our partners that helped us with this series. Thank the Richland Library, Historic Columbia, Columbia 63, Dominion Energy Charitable Foundation, SC Humanities, Center for Civil Rights and Historic Research, African American Studies Program at the University of South Carolina, and the Institute for African American Research at the University of South Carolina. Without those partners, we would not have been able to have this series. And so I thank them so much. And then I got to shout out my amazing committee who, as I mentioned before, I read this book and I wanted to do something with it. I called the most hardest working, smartest people I knew in the community that were passionate about these issues, and they stepped up and really helped put this together, because I could not do it myself. So I want to thank former City Councilwoman Ann Sinclair, Robin Waits with Historic Columbia, Dr. Bobby Donaldson, Todd Shaw, Professor Todd Shaw, Tamara King from Richland Library, and Jennifer Melton. Thank you all so much for helping take an idea and grow it into something that is going to be meaningful. And then I also have to shout out the amazing PR department at the City of Columbia, Historic Columbia, and Richland Library to help us with the live stream of these events, the taping, and making sure that we got the media about it. So what's next? Where do we go from here? That's what this was about. And so I have to just share with you guys that, this is not talk without action, but you have true city leaders who want to take this conversation and keep it going with you as the community and make sure that we're implementing things. So you've heard the mayor has a universal basic income program. And so he is leading that. And so that is going to be a great opportunity for us to really put some programs into place. We also conducted an equity study at the latter part of last year. So those results will be presented to City Council and the public very shortly, and you'll be able to see the results of that study. We also at the City of Columbia are really proud to say, thanks to Mayor Benjamin bringing to us the resource of the Bloomberg Foundation. We are this year, as the very first year, we're using an equity-centered budgeting process. And so our staff is going through that right now. And so you will see us use an equity lens as we do the city budget this year. COVID has presented challenges, but it's also presented lots of opportunities. And we've got to be bold enough to take advantage of those opportunities. And we're going to start with putting our money where our mouth is and making sure that our budget reflects our priorities and is done equitably. And then we also, partnering with Richland County and some private partners, the city will be doing an equity index assessment with the county so that we can use the data. Mayor Lyles mentioned very early on, having the information is one thing, but then once you have the information, you have to have a plan. And so we're going to make sure that we have the information so that we can have a plan. And so I invite you all to continue to reach out to us, make sure that you are part of our conversation, you're part of the plan, and you keep moving with us. So anyway, I just have to close with, I'd be remiss to say he's got 10 more months, so he's not going anywhere. But Mayor Benjamin did announce today that he will not be seeking re-election. So I have to say that, we are so thankful and we are blessed here in Columbia to have a leader like Mayor Benjamin, who has done an amazing job. And like I said, he's got 10 more months. And even as I tweeted earlier today, even after that 10 months, he's not going anywhere. He will still be working in our community, and maybe Mayor Lyles, the Mayor Lumumba, I can recruit him to continue to do some of this equity work that he is so great at, and continue to bring ideas and put them in place here in Columbia. So with that said, again, thank you all again so much for being here. Thank you for being part of this first part, this conversation, but now is the action. And so continue to engage with us at the city, and we will be moving forward to making sure that we are building an equitable, inclusive City of Columbia, providing bold leadership and making sure that we're putting the right things in place so that every person in Columbia has the ability to be successful. So thank you so much and good night.
Tamika, thank you. Thank you for your leadership on this. It's been amazing. And thank you, Judy, for being a fantastic and tough moderator tonight. But Tamika, thank you.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Special. Chokwe, Vi, love y'all. Thank you for giving the people of Columbia your time.
Okay, now, I have to give a shout out to Taylor Brothers. All of my brothers are down there. I have to say, Butch, Kyer, Ronald, Donald, love you much. Now I can go home peacefully.
If I could just throw in, I want you to know, first and foremost, both of these individuals mean a great deal to me, and we do bounce ideas off of each other. But I want the city of Columbia to know what a treasure you have had in Mayor Benjamin. And I'm sure that he wants to stay home, but if there's any chance that he will be moving, we'll offer him a job in Jackson, Mississippi to come and join us. So.
Thank you, brother.
Yes, that's great. All right. We'll see you guys soon. Love you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.